One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is December 7th, 2012. And tonight I am excited. I have a super guest on today. Before I get into it, I want to give a big shout out to Joe and Tim for an excellent broadcast last hour. Very good job, gentlemen. Info packed. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to look into the Leo Wanta story. I know there are those out there in the alternative media that say that, oh no, there's nothing to it. I've researched it. Trust me, when I tell you there's nothing to it, then I am the king. Well, when someone tells you that, you should go look into exactly what they tell you not to look into. So check out the Leo Wanta story. It's a pretty amazing story. All right. I want to get into things with my guest tonight because I do not want to waste any time. Last week, I had my good friend Judith Vary Baker on. Now, you all know who Judith is. She is the former girlfriend of Lee Harvey Oswald. She is a scientist. She was working on a cure for cancer, which actually got turned into a bioweapons project for the Pentagon and the CIA. And they were going to use it to kill Castro. And interestingly enough, how many patriots have died of fast-acting cancer, and people related to the Kennedy assassination died of fast-acting cancer. But anyway, last week, I was able to get on another gentleman to join Judith and I in the second hour, and his name is Vince Palamara. Now, Vince is the expert, the Secret Service expert, as they call him. I'm doing air quotes when I say that, in the Men Who Killed Kennedy series, Part 7. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. I have living, breathing proof on the line tonight with me, and Vince is going to be on the show with us for 2 hours, okay? Living, breathing proof that there are more than 6 pieces to this, and we're gonna get into that little story in a second. So we're going to cover the Secret Service aspect, the stand down, and more. And when it comes to the Secret Service stuff, Vince is an expert at the very least. He knows this stuff inside and out. He's got the bloody details, the gory details. And I want to get into the details tonight because it's important to show you if I can give you enough facts just on the stand down alone, then it goes to show that Lee Harvey Oswald was not a quote-unquote lone gunman, and there was a conspiracy, which is the one thing that they've been trying to keep. They never address anything conspiracy-oriented when it comes to the JFK assassination, because they always say, they meaning the powers that shouldn't be in the mainstream media, they always say, there was no conspiracy. Oswald acted alone. They could never admit that somebody, even as I said before, helped Oswald go to the gas station and get gas, because then that would be two people helping, doing this, and then therefore by definition would be a conspiracy, and it would open it up to all this other evidence that points to the fact that it is a conspiracy. So the only argument they have is that there is no conspiracy and that Oswald acted alone. And after tonight, even if you don't believe it, after all the evidence, after all the broadcasts I've done about JFK, right? Even if you don't believe the evidence, after tonight, and you hear about the Secret Service stand-down information, you have no choice but to obviously see that if the Secret Service stood down, by definition, it's a conspiracy. So without wasting any more time, I want to bring to the show my guest for this evening, Mr. Vince Palamara. Vince, welcome back, brother. It is an honor to have you on tonight, sir.
Oh, Popeye, hey, great. Feelings mutual. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
I remember the first time I saw the Men Who Killed Kennedy series, the parts 1 through 6, and a couple of months later, after digging around on the internet and trying to find more information about anything that was inside of it, I found out that there was this missing 3 pieces, the 7, 8, and 9. And I found them online, and I saw them, and I was just blown away, and I realized why they hid them. Now, I'll let you get into the details because I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is the real deal. When I tell you that I've said before that they put these last 3 pieces into the memory hole, there's a reason. Because the last 3 pieces, I mean, the whole thing, there in some of the earlier episodes, there might be some stuff that might lead you awry, or might be there to kind of be like red herring-ish. But the last 3 episodes were on point to the point where they actually had to be put in a memory hole, and you're not allowed to see them. And then Vince and I were talking about last week how they don't even air the episodes of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, the series, anymore. They used to air it. Now they air the Peter Jennings special, right?
Exactly. And tell you what, Pop, I'm telling your audience, too, that I got this straight from 2 customer service reps from the History Channel at the time. We're talking the fall of 2003, the 40th anniversary. They told me that the DVD sold over 50,000 copies, was the biggest selling DVD ever. We're talking $20 a pop, too. And the ratings were the biggest ratings ever. And we're talking parts 7, 8, and 9. And what it boils down to was the fact that Part 9 was Bar McClellan and his thing about, LBJ did it in his book, Blood, Money, and Power. And more so than even 7 and 8, 9 was the sticking point. So what happened was, make a long story short, you had a lot of former LBJ cronies, including at the time Lady Bird Johnson and the former presidents Ford and Carter and people like Jack Valenti and so on and so forth, come down and try to squelch the whole thing, and they were successful. What they did in April 2004, they aired a little History Channel tag, and it was basically saying that this was all conjecture and focusing on part 9. But the consequence of all this was, after they just summarily dismissed it, to no one's satisfaction, what they had, Robert Dowling, it was ridiculous how piecemeal their little reputation was. Well, they buried not only 7, 8, and 9, they stopped broadcasting parts 1 through 6, which were shown at least twice a year during different times, usually during the assassination anniversary, and even during like JFK's birthday for some reason on the A&E channel as well. And
both channels. You're right. The History Channel and A&E. That's a good point because it was pulled from both lineups, and they used to play it like differing times of the year. And around the Kennedy assassination, around the anniversary, they used to play it where History Channel would play it one week, A&E would play it one week, then the History Channel would play it another, a second time for a week, and then A&E would do it for a second time. And it would usually they would spread it out so it spanned most of the month of November, and they would play all 6 parts, one each night. And people it was a huge hit. So for this to be pulled off of the airwaves obviously makes no sense from a standpoint of, a television network. So obviously there had to have been something in there, information-wise, that really struck a nerve.
And I think it's exactly right. And also, Part 7, in addition to, that was my segment there on, the Men Who Killed Kennedy, the Smoking Guns. You also had the great medical work of Doctors David Mantic and Aguilar. You had Jim Fetzer on there. On Part 8, obviously, was Judith Baker, Oswald's girlfriend. You had all that. So everything got, throw the baby out with the bathwater. If they had a problem, worst case scenario, maybe get rid of Part 9 if you're going to do that. But their whole concentration was on Part 9, yet the entire series suffered from their censorship. It just was ridiculous. And ironic, it wasn't like it was a rating smash, and the DVD sold incredibly well. So it's like they bit their own hand and fed them. I just didn't make any sense, you know. But
unless you
want to give you a thumbnail sketch of myself, kind of bring us up to speed. If you want to,
do that for the listener, because there's a lot of listeners out there that might have not have been gotten a chance to hear the broadcast from last week with Judith. So go ahead and give the listeners a little bit of an idea of who you are.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, well, basically, I'm just a private citizen from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I quote unquote have a life. I have a job, full time and everything, but I've always had an interest in President Kennedy, presidents in general, but especially President Kennedy, in the assassination. So far, other than maybe the Secret Service, that doesn't make me much different from millions of other people. And but what happened was in 1988, the 25th anniversary, really stoked my interest. And then from between 1988 and 1990 is when I began primary research, which means going from just reading someone else's book to doing my own interviews, my own legwork, my own research, looking at actual documents and so on and so forth. And this leads us up to 1991. Trust me, this is a thumbnail sketch. This is not going to be per year. There's a point to this. In 1991, Jerry Rose, his old journal, The Third Decade, later called The Fourth Decade, he had a conference in Fredonia, New York. And I went there, basically, it was pretty much a virtual unknown at the time. Keep in mind, this was before the Internet and so on. And it was basically the old snail mail and, networking like that. Some there with 60-some people, of which about 15 to 20 of us did our presentations. I got up there. I did my presentation in front of people that were old enough to be my father, in some respects my grandfather at the time, because I was only in my early 20s. And it was on the Secret Service. Now, my presentation was... it was 100% secondary source. It was just my own observations based on many books and films, but just want to stress that there was no primary source, in my first presentation ever. And people were basically blown away, saying, Vince, I guess that's why the Secret Service is so secret. I never really thought about them. I never noticed them before. They're just not on my radar. And that's when I realized, okay, in this room of people that are so at each other's throats, don't agree about anything other than the fact there was a conspiracy, or sort of welcome me with open arms, I knew that, okay, I really have to go from, secondary sources to really interviewing people. And this leads us up to 1992. Up to this time, begrudgingly, I believed some of the pablum about JFK that, obviously shame he died, whether we believed Oswald did or did not do it. Maybe he had it coming to him because, certain things he supposedly didn't want. He didn't want those agents on the back of his car, and he didn't want the motorcycles around him. So I contacted the special agent in charge of his detail. This is the #1 agent, not some flunky, not some private. He would be, basically make an analogy, he'd be like the General Eisenhower of the Secret Service, Jerry Bain, who ironically passed away 6 months later of cancer. The gentleman was in his early 70s at the time. And I broached the subject to him, and I expected him to basically, say, yeah, this is true, so on. He told me his exact quote. I don't remember Kennedy ever saying he didn't want anybody on the back of his car. If you look at the newsreel pictures, you'll see agents on there from time to time. And the phone was dropped. I just couldn't believe, what? This is unbelievable. The guy was very lucid, but I'm thinking, okay, calm down. This is this one guy, even though he was a special agent in charge, and #1 agent, people on the other side, because I'm always thinking of the naysayers. I'm always thinking you got to corroborate things. Don't have somebody out in an island there. You got to really corroborate things. And that's the way I am. I'm a natural skeptic, too. I have an open mind. Some people say I have too open of a mind sometimes. That's another story. So anyway, what happened was from there, I started contacting a lot of Jerry Bain's colleagues, and this is totally independent from each other. They didn't know I was contacting them. They lived in other states. I'm a total stranger on the phone or I was about to say email. This is back in the snail mail days. And it was like they were reading cue cards. They all used that same kind of language. That President Kennedy was a very nice man. He was not difficult to protect. He never ordered us off the back of the car. There was no exceptions. There was nothing raining on my parade, so to speak. There wasn't anything, there was this one time we went to Philadelphia and he was a taskmaster and he told us not to do this. They were all, it was a landslide of this one agent after another. And we're talking a lot of agents that were in Dallas, too, including like the driver of the fob car, Sam Kinney, who was very forceful. Luckily for me, some of these guys consented to be taped, and some of the same gentlemen have now passed away of old age and whatnot. And we got it now for the record that they're saying is Floyd Boring, who was the number 2 agent, Jerry Baines' assistant, said the same thing. Said, oh, he's a very nice man. Never interfere with our actions at all. So now I'll just stop there for a second and back up a little bit. What that means is history. If you read, I guess, the average book out there, whether it's, pro or con, a lot of them basically say, well, JFK kind of helped, so to speak. He was kind of like, what his favorite poem was, I Have a Rendezvous with Death. Well, he was kind of, reckless of the security. And the more I looked at my research with films and photographs and primary documents, and especially all these agents, I spoke to 80 agents, okay, and family members, as well as White House aides like Pierre Salinger, people like Dave Powers, who was arguably JFK's best friend in the whole world, who was on the Dallas trip. And they all said the same thing, that he never interfered with their security. So needless to say, from there, that's when I started to look at the assassination. And, Papa, if you want, I can also just give you a little thumbnail sketch of what the Secret Service was responsible for with the assassination.
Let's get into the details a little bit here, because, a lot of people don't even realize, they see the videos. Even if you watch the videos that were taken that day of him driving around and the motorcade driving around, all those windows that were open that you see and the still shots and stuff, that stuff shouldn't have been, those windows shouldn't have been open. Prouty talked about this. Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty has said, none of those windows should have been open. If the Secret Service was doing their job, all those windows would have been shut. There would have been snipers up on the rooftops looking to see if there were other snipers. They do counter sniper work. That's what they'd be doing. This is standard operating procedure. And it's not like something. This is stuff that he did back. He even said that they did back in the 50s with Eisenhower. So there's no reason that this shouldn't have happened later on in the 60s with Kennedy.
Right, exactly. And for example, like I pulled up a buddy of mine, Bill Adams, found an article in the Nashville Tribune for JFK's trip to the city of Nashville in May of 1963. And it says right there in the paper for all those thousands of citizens to read, a complete check of the entire motorcade route was done by the Secret Service. Other police officers were assigned atop the municipal terminal and other buildings along the route. These men took their posts at 8 a.m. and remained on their rooftop stations until the president and his party passed. And I found out that the roofs of buildings were guarded 4 days before Dallas, in addition to San Antonio the day before, as well as in Fort Worth the morning of the assassination. It was crazy. And Chief Inspector Michael Torina, he said if the president is to appear in a parade, agents and policemen are assigned posts atop buildings and on the street along the parade route. So, and then he also told William Manchester that whenever a motorcade must slow down for a turn, the entire intersection must be checked in advance, which sounds a lot like what happened on Elm Street when JFK's limousine, slid down to 11 miles an hour. It's just basically, just to give it again, I'm a big fan of thumbnail sketches because you don't want to, overload people and kind of give them an idea, a little sketch of things. Is that security is both overt and covert. And it's not just one item or the lack thereof. Like some people will say, hey, Vince, I noticed on this trip JFK had a bubble pop, and this one he didn't. Sometimes I see agents on the car. Sometimes I don't. It's everything in toto, and it's based on the intelligence. Basically what it boils down to is you have agents on or near the rear of the limousine, okay, which did not happen in Dallas, allegedly because JFK didn't want them there, which is not true. You had a heavy motorcycle formation, which was used on all the prior Texas stops except for Dallas, allegedly because JFK wanted to hear a conversation. That's extremely lame. Even Wynn Lawson was the lead advance agent, Secret Service lead advance agent, told the Warren Commission there was not specifically an order from the president. He was the agent who met with Dallas Police Chief Curry, and the night before changed everything. Actually, he bled into the morning at Love Field. That there was at least 4 Dallas police officers that were assumed that they were still going to take their positions besides the limousine, and they were put further away. One of them, ironically, was Marion Baker. And the special agent in charge for his immediate assistant, which would be Boehner Boring, they were always on JFK's trips. Any president previously, like Eisenhower, Truman, it was the number one guy and the number two guy. Make an analogy. It would be like going to the Super Bowl and starting your third stringer on the bench, and that's what Roy Kellerman was. Okay? Then you got the motorcade route. Usually they traveled at a good clip, a nice speed. We're not talking 70, 80 miles an hour, but a heck of a lot more than 11 to 20 miles an hour. And the route didn't include hazardous hairpin turns, like the turn of 90 and 120 degrees, which was Maine to Houston and Houston to Elm. Overpasses were cleared, which they weren't in Dallas. I just talked about the speed of the car. Bill Greer, the driver of the president's car.
I was about to bring that up. Everybody says, "Oh, he turned around and shot the president." No, Greer didn't turn around and shoot anything. But what Greer did do was Greer hit the brakes, and that put Kennedy right in the middle of that triangulation, that field of fire, and that gave the snipers, who only need but a split second to realize what's going on, and as soon as they see the limo slow down, thank you, boom. And as soon as the limo slowed down, that's when the headshot came in. Bam. And then they took off. So
exactly.
He's, in my eyes, he's just as guilty as the guy who squeezed the trigger from behind the fence on the grassy knoll.
And ironically, people like Gerald Posner and Vince Bugliosi agree with us. So ironically, you got both camps that even concede certain things to kind of go in one ear and not the other with people, because everybody gets so tied up in knots about this silly stuff about Greer shooting the president. No, but in figuratively speaking, he did, because not only did he hit the brakes, he looked back once. He denied ever seeing the president. He looked back once. Roy Kellerman, his superior, said, "Get out of line, we've been hit." And you see Roy Kellerman in this Bruder film grabbing the microphone. Well, that's when Greer disobeyed the order of his superior and looked back the second time and was looking right at Kennedy, which he's not doing, until the fatal shot made its mark. Only then did he face forward and hit the gas. Yes, history, just that one agent alone. And ironically, I just discovered this about 7, 8 years ago. There very well could have been another driver in Dallas. Unfortunately, he died October 14th, 1963 of a heart attack at Camp David. If you heard it right, Thomas Shipman was an agent who was in the, what they called it, the garage detail. Bill Greer, Tom Shipman.
We're going to get cut off, Vince, because we got a break sneaking up on us. What I want to do is I want to pick up right here, because I didn't even know about this. Again, you learn something new every day. So I'll have you rewind about a minute, and we'll pick right up where we're leaving off. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. More with my special guest tonight, Vince Palamara. You do not want to miss the rest of this interview. We are back, ladies and gentlemen, and tonight I am joined for 2 hours by my special guest, Vince Palamara. Everyone, anyone listening now anyway, already knows a little bit about him. Anybody just tuning in, Vince is the quote-unquote Secret Service expert on the JFK assassination, but I wouldn't just pigeonhole him. I mean, Vince is a super smart guy. He's awake, aware. He knows what's going on with all of this stuff, the bigger picture. His specialty happens to be researching a lot about the JFK assassination and the Secret Service in general, but he also knows more about a lot of the backstory and what was going on behind the scenes with the arrest of the assassination. So I don't want to just pigeonhole him by saying he's the Secret Service expert, even though he is. I don't want to just pigeonhole him and make everybody think that that's his, only area of expertise, because he is a very smart individual. And if you have never heard of him, you can check him out. The Men Who Killed Kennedy, Part 7. It's on YouTube. I have links up on Federal Jack under the Truth Movie section. Just go to federaljack.com, go to the Truth Movie section under the JFK assassination, and you will see The Men Who Killed Kennedy, 7, 8, and 9. Part 7, The Smoking Guns, and you will see Vince for yourself. But I also urge you to just stay tuned in for the next hour and a half, because you will be hearing more than actually what was broadcast on The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Would you say Nigel interviewed you for like 13 hours or something, and they used 5?
Oh, yeah. It actually was like 16 hours over 2 days, and they whittled it down to just under 5 minutes. He did a darn good job of making like a cliff note, so to speak, of my everything I had to say, but I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, my God, all that time. So, yeah, it's crazy. All that, it's so much outtakes, hours and hours of outtakes.
Well, you don't have to worry about that. I'll let you go on, and just I'll give you the floor here. In fact, when we were going to break, you said something interesting that I want to get back into, because I don't want to get too sidetracked. Right. We were talking about how Greer didn't turn around and cap Kennedy in the head. It was more of a he hit the brakes and he turned around and make sure that the mark got it and then turned around and took off. So obviously that shows he was in on it. And people, I don't know if you've ever seen the video out there, but there's video evidence. Just Google Secret Service stand down, JFK assassination, and you'll see right as the car makes a right-hand turn onto Elm Street, right before it makes the right, you'll see the two guys that are running alongside or like right behind it. They get flagged off. And one of them, I forget his name, but he turns around and he looks at his superiors in the car behind like, what the F? And he throws his arms up in a, are you kidding me? Like, really? And then the car makes that fateful right turn.
Yeah, and what that was, and I presented at the Medical Kennedy. In fact, obviously the footage, I was born in 1966, so I'm 46. This happened before my time, but I like to think that I, quote-unquote, discovered that footage because in 1995 at the COPA conference in Washington, D.C., I presented that footage, and based on everyone's reaction then and for years after, up to and including the time it was on the Medical Kennedy in 2003, I basically knew that I had discovered this footage, so to speak, and when it had gone onto the Internet in 2005, I guess someone else dredged up a little bit more of a rougher copy. Actually, it begins at Love Field, the beginning of the motorcade. But this one, we'll get right back to Thomas Shipman, but I was going to say something for the record because I always like to correct my errors and whatnot. This is a big thing that was made in Gerald Blaine, former Secret Service agent, came out with this book called The Kennedy Detail in 2010, which is something we'll cover. But on page 359, he basically takes me to task for misidentifying the agent who was recalled at Love Field that you were just bringing up. His name, I thought, was Henry Ribka. It actually was Don Lawton. However, I made a YouTube video basically as an addendum to this saying that, well, I might have misidentified the agent, but there's very good reasons why I did. I present reports. I present photos. Basically, my whole rationale, in the big scheme of things, doesn't mean a hill of beans, but because to show you that I'm man enough to admit that I made a mistake, and I'm also man enough to show that it do not get sidetracked. He tried to make a big deal in his book about Vince made this error, and it wasn't even Henry Ribka, it was Don Lawton. But he's trying to obfuscate the big picture of what that video shows. It shows a stand down is what it does. Emory Roberts, who was the shift leader in the fall car, commander of all his agents, all 8 agents in the fall car, he gets up and with his hand gestures and his voice motions the agent to cease and desist from jogging along with the car, and the agent turned out to be Don Lawton, raised his hands 3 different times in disgust. Paul Landis, one of the other agents, tried to make room for him in the fall car on the running board. He didn't budge. I spoke to Don Lawton, and this is ironic. I spoke to Don Lawton at the time. I did not know that he was the actual agent who was recalled at Love Field. And at that time, I thought it was Henry Ribka. And Don Lawton told me, sure, you have regrets and remorse. Who knows? If they would have left the guys in the back of the car in Dallas, you can hindsight yourself to death. I was like, wow. And now in the context of that video, it really looms large because he didn't rain on my parade. None of these guys did. None of these agents did. I'm a stranger on the phone and in correspondence, and here they're telling me things and go against official history. Ironically, many of them, not all of them, but many of them believed Oswald acted alone. At the same time, they're telling me President Kennedy never interfered with their actions and yada, yada, yada. But getting back to what we were saying before the break, and again, I just want to tell the listening audience that you don't have to take my word for any of this. If you Google my name, Vince Palamara, Palamara, I have a heavy presence online. I have basically one major blog and a few other ancillary blogs, as well as a YouTube channel and a lot of other people's books and so on and so forth. And you can see the documentation. It's not like you have to take my word for it tonight. This is true. You can do your own digging. You can even do it live as I'm talking and go online and you can see these things. It's not made up in thin air. I'm giving you names. I'm giving you places to look. You can actually see the documents. The interviews. I actually have copies of the letters. I have the audio tapes on YouTube. So there they are. But This was amazing. Again, about eight years ago, I discovered this totally by accident. Former Secret Service agent George McNally, he later went on to the White House Signal Corps. He passed away in, I think, around 1970. His widow came out with his manuscript in 1982. And this book is very obscure. You couldn't get it in bookstores. But make a long story short, there was a passage in the book. It said that Thomas Shipman, one of JFK's drivers, died suddenly. And this was just unbelievable to me. What? You got to be kidding me. So I did more digging, and it took several months to find this out. Now you can just go online and put Thomas Shipman in the former agents of the United States Secret Service have annual conventions, and they have a roll call of all fallen heroes and whatnot. And you'll see October 14th, 1963, Thomas B. Shipman died of a heart attack at Camp David. Well, I talked to Sam Kinney, who was the driver of the fall car in Dallas and countless other trips, and he reiterated that himself, Thomas Shipman, and Bill Greer were the drivers of the president's car. Sam Kinney usually drove just the fall car. Okay, so it comes down to Shipman and Greer. Shipman passes away, so it leaves the obvious choice. Was it a quirk of fate or something more? Greer was so inept. If Shipman was the driver in Dallas, would he have done a better job? I think just about anybody. I think my grandma could have done a better job. I mean, just imagine out there in the listening audience. You have a loved one in the back seat, and a gunshot goes off. You look back, you see the distress on the person. Are you going to sit there and disobey your friend next to you saying, get out of line? Are you not going to hit the gas? Are you going to look back twice and disobey an order and wait for more danger to befall them? And this was the President of the United States. These guys are on high alert. They already knew Dallas was what JFK called nut country. Okay, JFK also told Henry Gonzalez the day before the assassination, a San Antonio congressman, says, the Secret Service took care of everything. The Secret Service took care of everything. Henry, there's nothing to worry about. He also told advanced man to the Democratic National Committee, Marty Underwood, Marty, you worry about me too much. Because Marty heard all these rumors the president was going to get assassinated. Yes, I spoke to Marty Underwood, and that's what he told me as well. And so basically you had this undercurrent of fear in Dallas. You had Senator William Fulbright, warning JFK not to go to Dallas. At JFK's own apprehension, which was made manifest in the fact that JFK himself was saying, not only we're in that country, but boy, last night would have been a hell of a night to assassinate a president. A hell of a night. Someone was up there with a rifle and scope, and he also made this analogy about somebody dropping a pistol in a briefcase in Houston, and then you got what he said to Henry Gonzalez, you got what Marty Underwood said. Well, it does just show you Dallas was a quote-unquote hot city. Now, getting back to my list of things the Secret Service did not do in Dallas, well, I said that security was both overt and covert. The covert part of security is the intelligence, looking for potential threats to the president. They still do this to this day. Say President Obama goes to Philadelphia. Well, you're going to have an advanced team do the same thing that he did 50 years ago or more. They're going to check to see, is there any nutcases out there? Are there any potential groups plotting his demise or any kind of demonstrations? Believe it or not, and this is documented in the Warren Report and countless other sources, they found no threats, ostensibly, no threats in Dallas. Even future President Gerald Ford found this unusual when he was interviewing Roy Kellerman under oath during the Warren Commission hearings. Abraham Bolden, former agent, even told me this was unusual. Well, what really gets unusual, speaking about Thomas Shipman, specific agents and unusual things, well, you have a confluence of things that happened in November, just a few short weeks before the assassination. They're just unbelievable. And just a thumbnail sketch again, it's real simple to understand. You have the President DM of Vietnam killed November 1st. November 2nd, JFK's Chicago motorcade is canceled. Okay? Abraham Bolden has been adamant since that time, because he was in the Chicago office from the White House detail, he went there, so it was because of a four-man gun team that was going to kill Kennedy in Chicago. Okay, but Kennedy used the same fake excuse he used during the missile crisis. I have a cold, that's why I went back to Washington. You can believe that. Between November 8th and 9th, JFK made a first trip to New York, which was an off-the-record trip. During November 9th, that same day, you got Joseph Miltier in Miami saying, this Kennedy's going to get hit. He's got what's coming to him. It's going to happen in an office building with a high-powered rifle, as Don Adams in his book has said. And everybody knows about the Miltier story. Willie Somerset was the informant. Well, wait till you hear this. November 10th, Glenn Bennett from the Protective Research Section of the Secret Service, Protective Research is the one that monitors threats, he was temporarily assigned to the White House detail. And before you catch your breath on that, There were no prior PRS agents on the trips. Bert DeFries even admitted to the House Select Committee in documents that only came out in the 1990s that it was unusual for PRS agents to be on any kind of presidential trip. They were administrative agents. They hung out back in Washington, D.C. with their spectacles looking for nasty postcards and threats and whatnot. Well, here was Bennett, temporarily assigned to the White House detail. It gets worse. Okay? The next day, a special agent in charge of PRS, Robert Bauch, okay, sends Bennett to New York in advance of JFK's second New York trip. Okay, and I got to jump ahead for a second. Glenn Bennett, under oath to the House Select Committee, denied he was on the upcoming Florida trip, and he was on the Florida trip because the Secret Service shift reports that came out in the 1990s shows him there. He lied and said he wasn't on the Florida trip. He was on the Florida trip riding in the follow-up car. He made no mention of being on the New York trip. Again, these men are there to monitor threats. In Clint Hill's new book, Mrs. Kennedy and Me, which is a pretty innocuous book about Jackie Kennedy, there's a few morsels in the book that are unbelievable. Clint Hill admits that Glenn Bennett is, quote, handling intelligence in Dallas. Oh, really? Because Gerald Blaine of the Kennedy detail told me, well, it's unusual he was there, but it was a manpower poll for Dallas. And if you believe that, I got some swampland I want to tell you. But back to the chronology here. November 13th, Army codebreaker Eugene Dinkin had full knowledge of threats and reported to his superiors in the Army. You had that second New York trip that JFK made. The sequence of everything is crucial. It's before Dallas, okay? Just about a week before Dallas. You had Glenn Bennett on the New York trip. JFK goes to Florida the next day. There's Glenn Bennett, who's denying it to the House Select Committee. He's riding in the follow-up car, okay? Then he goes to Dallas. Win Lawson, the advance agent for Dallas, had to remind Glenn Bennett that he was going to ride in the follow-up car. Now, this is all from shift reports, and reports that are either in the Warren Commission volumes or they're in the reports that were released in the 1990s. You can thank Oliver Stone's movie JFK. All those millions of documents that were released from the AARB had all these morsels. The sad thing is it takes investigators decades later to uncover these things. Imagine the stuff when it came out back in 1963-64. Heads would have rolled. But that was a very naive time. I don't want to get on a tangent, but basically what it boils down to is what my dad always told me. He told me, Vince, 50 people that killed Kennedy. We were so bereaved. Any details went in one ear, not the other. Before Watergate, before Vietnam, all these details didn't matter. Okay, so people could swallow them if they didn't want to swallow an idea of a lone gunman. Okay, now you have the day before Dallas, all the aforementioned people saying, JFK, this is a bad city, I wouldn't go there. And again, you have Glenn Bennett. Now, before you can even catch your breath about Glenn Bennett, well, in a shift report released in 1998 from the ARB, okay, it's the November 22nd shift report of some of the agents, including Gerald Blaine of the Kennedy detail. He's in Austin waiting for Kennedy, who never arrived because he was murdered. One of the agents on the shift report, his name is Norton, Norton. I was like, boy, I never heard of that name. Well, I spoke to this other unrelated matter, Dale Wunderlich. He was a PRS agent. He was in Fort Worth. And that's another story why he was there. He says that, oh, yeah, that's Howard K. Norton. He was the first technical security man of the service. And then he started back to, well, Howard was there on the Florida and Texas trips, but he wasn't there as an actual agent. And you could tell he was hemming and hawing because, what the hell was Howard Norton doing there? He's a PRS agent. He should be back in Washington. Why is he on this trip if Oswald's a lone assassin in the quirk of fate? Why are these PRS agents following JFK, New York, Florida, and Texas? Why are they lying about it? Why isn't it in reports they were really there for that purpose? The $64 million question is, okay, Vince, why? Why were they there? Why they were there is don't believe that, pardon the phrase, crapola about lack of threats in Dallas. That was the ostensible official story because that was to cover the fact that, the security was overt. Because, hey, they found no threats, so, hey, we don't have to have agents in the back of the car. We don't have to have the partial or full bubble top, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because if they would have found threats and the threats would have been public, then everybody before, during, and after would have been crying, why weren't there more overt security? But that's when the mythology of JFK being difficult to protect scooped everything over. Then when you couple it with the fact that supposedly found no threats, which is not true, and also go back to the Florida trip from 4 days before, even Gerald Blaine admitted this to me on the phone. He didn't have to. I had the reports from the late 90s that came out. Again, all these reports that came out very recently, that the CIA was even helping them in Tampa and Miami because they had page after page of Cubans, the one that killed Kennedy, all these threats to JFK's life. And this brings us up to the year 2005. We're talking about, the men who killed Kennedy in 2003. Well, I sent a 22-page letter to Clint Hill. Clint Hill, obviously, of Mrs. Kennedy, Meet Book fame, and the agent who jumped in the back of the car in the Zapruder film, on and on. Arguably the most famous Secret Service agent ever. I was bold enough to send him a 22-page letter, which was basically a Cliff Notes version of all my research up to that time. And basically what the letter, and it's on, all this is online, you can check this out for yourself, basically ends with, well, Clint, God bless you, it's a shame what happened, but if your superiors wouldn't have had this pablum, this propaganda, they all told me the JFK didn't order you guys with the car. Why did this have to be, Clint? And he was very nasty with me. Gerald Blaine, now keep in mind, there's no Kennedy detailed book. None of this is in the air. Well, I spoke to Gerald Blaine later that day, and he goes, hey, don't be too hard on Emory Robert and some of these agents. They were double, even triple checkers. I'm like, wait a minute. They shared the contents of my letter with each other. Gerald Blaine even admitted that's when he began his book. If you read his book is basically Oswald did it and JFK helped too. You heard that right. Oswald did it and JFK helped. Oswald acted alone and JFK had a rendezvous with death, and it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, and he ordered us off the car, and he was reckless, and this guy I won't dare name, which is me, stabbed us in the back with baseless accusations. You know why? Because the truth hurts. All these gentlemen, years before Gerald Blaine even thought to write the book, told me what they told me. Gerald Blaine even told me that JFK never interfered with their actions. Okay? And, I'll probably stop, catch my breath a little bit if you want to, Pop, if you want to interject anything. I'm sorry if I'm going on and on here.
No, I mean, I wanted you to get into detail, and that was that. Look, if the listeners, I know a lot of this stuff, but it's important for the listeners to hear it come from your mouth, not, just from mine. I mean, I could say things, and it'd sound like I'm repeating stuff. It doesn't matter. It's better to hear the information coming right from the researcher's mouth himself. And, obviously, you can see it was more than Oswald, right? I mean, even if you believe Oswald did it, right, which there's been enough evidence to prove that he didn't, but even if you believe that Oswald was one of the gunmen, obviously it was more than just him. It wasn't a quote-unquote lone gunman because there was this huge, massive Secret Service stand-down. It wasn't like one or two guys being derelict in their duties. This was literally a massive stand down on a massive scale to the point where it was ensured that Kennedy had the most slack security going into Dallas, an area which he was already somewhat uncomfortable going into, and that they knew was kind of hostile towards him, right?
Correct.
I mean,
and another thing too is, I've always said, I've said this since at least 1995 in national conferences. I've always said my tagline is Oswald or no Oswald, conspiracy or no conspiracy. If these gentlemen would have did their normal professional job, JFK would have lived. And this is no witch hunt on the Secret Service. Ironically, I'm actually a big admirer of the Secret Service. I think 95 to 99% of these guys were quote-unquote squeaky clean. The agency in the decades since been incredible, okay? And this agency has been around in one form or another since 1865, the 19th century. So this is no witch hunt. I don't have an axe to grind. This all came about by accident. Jerry Bain, not Blaine, but Bain, the special agent in charge, didn't tell me what he told me on, this is ironic, this is today, today's the 71st anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and FDR said that the day will live in infamy. My day of infamy, live in infamy with me, is September 27, 1992, when Jerry Bain's telling a total stranger on the phone, I don't remember Kennedy ever saying he didn't want anybody on the back of his limo. If you look at the newsreel pictures, you'll see the agents there from time to time. And all his underlings said the same thing, including Gerald Blaine of the Kennedy detail. And that's when, again, I looked at documents. I spoke to more people. I spoke to White House aides. I looked at other trips. And here's another thing I just wanted to say for the record, too, because sometimes you get, and I always play devil's advocate. I appreciate that mode of thinking. Sometimes people will look at one isolated photograph from a particular trip, and they'll go, "Hey, Vince,
Vince, you know what? I'm gonna have to cut you off because the break's gonna sneak up and cut us off. So on the other side of the break, I'm gonna have you rewind about a minute and a half, and then I want you to say what you were about to the little information bomb that you're about to drop. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Hour number 1 up. Hour number 2 coming up with my guest tonight, Vince Palamara. Check out The Men Who Killed Kennedy, Part 7, and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is December 7th, 2012. By the way, I don't know if anybody realizes what day that is, but that's the day that Pearl Harbor got attacked. I know Vince mentioned it earlier. And tonight, I am joined by the quote-unquote Secret Service expert, but so much more on the Kennedy assassination and other things, ladies and gentlemen. There is more to the man than just the JFK assassination. Very, very smart individual. It is definitely a pleasure to have him on. Vince, it really is. It's a pleasure to have you on. And
it's mutual, man. Thanks a lot.
Well, you know, I could sit and, you know, I saw you in The Men Who Killed Kennedy, Part 7, you know, and I've seen some of your other research, but being able to pick your brain and have, you know, conversations on air and off air, it's just amazing. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's Mr. Vince Palamara. And Vince, you have a bunch of you have a website and a bunch of other stuff. Like, I think you have a YouTube channel and stuff, or if you have any Facebook or Twitter. I know you have a pretty big online presence. So I want you to plug everything that you have. Any way people can check out your work, get in touch with you, whatever. And then go ahead and you can segue it into what you were going to get into before we got interrupted by the break, and I'll just give you the floor.
Oh, sounds good. Okay, yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, just in a general sense, if you go to Google, Yahoo, whatnot, and you type in Vince Palamara, Palamara, a lot of my blogs, websites I'm associated with, so on and so forth, pops up. But specifically, a couple, 2 or 3 items to really go look at is CTKA, Citizens for Truth and Kennedy Assassination. C as in cat, T as in Tom, K as in Kennedy, A as assassination. Put in CTKA Kennedy detail, and my lengthy, if you print it out, it's 44 pages. My in-depth review of Gerald Blaine's book, The Kennedy Detail, is there, extremely footnoted, documented. It's actually a good synthesis of my work. That's there. Also, my blog. I have... to show how crazy things are online sometimes. I actually have 3 other ancillary blogs. The main blog is vincepalamara.com. And I also have a YouTube channel. The great thing about the YouTube channel is you can actually hear some of these now deceased agents telling me these things I'm telling you about. You can hear it in their own words. And I also have quite a few videos where I'm actually showing the letters and correspondence of what these gentlemen, sometimes these guys have passed away since, what they had to say. And I also have very rare motorcade films and photos. And I also have a very interesting thing. In addition to being on The Men Who Killed Kennedy, I was on C-SPAN once. Now, not C-SPAN in the sense that I was there with Brian Lamb. A YouTube video of me was there with Brian Lamb. Gerald Blaine of the Kennedy Detail and Clint Hill of Mrs. Kennedy and Me fame. They were there, and out of nowhere, Brian Lamb talks enough about the Secret Service expert, lives in Pittsburgh, PA, blah, 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 and they show a YouTube video of me, and Gerald Blaine and Clint Hill debate, so to speak, the merits of my research and kind of go through some things. It's kind of funny. Well, I put that video on my YouTube channel, and I interjected some new video to kind of counterpoints, like a nice little debate, so to speak, of what they had to say. That's been aired several times. It's also on DVD. And just in May, Clint Hill was on C-SPAN again, and I guess I'm on his mind because out of nowhere, Brian Lamb goes, remember that fellow we talked about the last program, Vince Palamara? Well, he's a great fan of your book, meaning Mrs. Kennedy and Me, not the Kennedy Detail, because it's about Jackie Kennedy. It's, other than a few pages, it's pretty innocent. But now, back to what we were saying before the break. And again, I appreciate skepticism. I appreciate having an open mind, playing devil's advocate. I do it all the time when it comes to my research, and it's a good way to go through life in a lot of respects, question everything. And I get well-meaning people and sometimes not so well-meaning people, the nature of the Internet, you know how that goes. I'd say it runs about 90% favorable, and you always get, trolls and people every once in a while say, hey, Vince, I get this photograph of JFK in a Y. I don't see agents on the back of the car. What they don't realize is, again, it's not just one element, it's the big picture. Security is both overt and covert. If you look at one snapshot of one thing, you can go, aha, but you don't know the big picture. Point in fact was, and this was actually on the ABC documentary the dangerous years of Kennedy administration. It was with the I'll get into this another. I don't want to get on a tangent, but there was 4 Secret Service agents that were interviewed by Seymour Hersh, talked about JFK's private life. During that broadcast for millions of people to see, they showed moving footage, lengthy, of the Hawaii trip. I also have it on my YouTube channel. And lo and behold, there's agents running with the limousine and walking with the limousine. Sometimes the agents took breaks and they went back to their post, so to speak, in the fall car, and they did it at times was safe, when the cars were going faster, when the advanced security deemed that it was okay. It was not a location they deemed hazardous for snipers and whatnot. So sometimes a photographer would take a photograph of a point like that. It's also happened in Ireland, too. And agents rode on the car there, too, but sometimes they took breaks and they fell back at points where the cars were moving faster and whatnot. And you get sometimes people trying to get an aha moment. You go, hey, Vince, I see this picture, and they don't see it. What about the buildings being checked? What about the speed of the cars? What about the bubble pop? On and on. They just focus on one thing. Now, this is the well-meaning part. Now, there actually are 3 areas I want people to realize when it comes to President Kennedy and protection. I am not trying to say that 2012 protection is on the same plane as 1961 and 1963 protection. It wasn't, because terrorism wasn't even on the agenda. I mean, we're not going to quibble about the Middle East and that. For all intents and purposes, terrorism was not on the Secret Service's mind in 61 and 63. It was the quote-unquote lone gunmen, or maybe gunmen, so to speak. That was it, okay? Think about the Truman attempt, November 1st, the attempt on President-elect FDR and TR when he tried to run again. Well, if you see footage of President Kennedy at military bases, you're not going to see any real overt security, okay? And why? He's on a military base. Friendly soil, very secure. I mean, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of military men there. You're not going to see it there. That's number 1. Number 2, motorcades in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., where the inaugural parade is held every 4 years. Again, you're not going to see any real overt protection other than maybe 2 fall-off cars as opposed to 1, and decent motorcycle formation. And that's because it's very well-traveled, well advanced. They have all the buildings secured, manhole covers checked, mailboxes, guarded, so on and so forth. So you're not going to see it there. Finally, candidate Kennedy. When JFK was the senator running for president, you're not going to see Secret Service around and overt protection. That's because until, ironically, his brother Bobby was shot, the Secret Service didn't protect candidates. Ironically, Dave Power said, every time a Kennedy dies, the Secret Service improves themselves. So again, to summarize, military bases, motorcades in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., and when he's a candidate, you're not going to see overt protection. And that does not go against what I'm espousing here. Again, military bases very secure. Washington, D.C., very secure. When JFK was a candidate, the point was moved. There wasn't any, other than private bodyguard or 2, there wasn't going to be anything. That's the way Rosie Greer was with RFK. And again, the old gotcha trick, got the still photo here and here. You got to look at the big picture. I'm not espousing JFK had agents on the back of the car every trip 24/7. First of all, there's a lot of hyperbole when people don't realize that JFK didn't go on a motorcade every week, every month. I mean, we're talking about a guy that, unfortunately, very unfortunately, did not live, 3 full years of his term. It was brutally assassinated. There weren't a lot of trips. I mean, we're talking like he had a trip, for a very ballyhooed foreign trip to Germany, Italy, Ireland, and England in June and July of 63. Well, guess what? Agents did ride in the back of the car. A full partial bubble top was used. Tremendous motorcycles. That whole trip was tremendous, okay? And not to get into too much of the gory details here, because then we'd be here for hours and hours and hours, but just briefly, 4 days before Dallas, security was terrific. Again, I covered Hawaii. You'll find trips in the summer of 63. You'll find trips in the spring of 63 when we went to Chicago. Abraham Bolden was on that trip. The documents came out. Agents were on the back of the car. A running theme you'll see is when you see the reports that have been released. Many of these reports have been released very recently, in the last 15 years, I'd say, ever since the AARB released them, is you'll see, unlike Dallas, they'll admit the threat was found. A postcard, somebody saying a bomb, like in El Paso. When JFK went to El Paso June 5th, 1963, ironically to visit Governor Connolly and talk about the upcoming Dallas trip, there was a bomb threat made, okay? And that came out in documents. Well, you see photos of that trip. The military is lining the street and facing the crowd, which is another thing to tick off. Think about my list of items to tick off and to keep in your memory bank here about security. Okay, not all these things, but many of these things held true. Again, agents on or near the rear of the limo. Okay, motorcycle formations were often plentiful, and they rode right beside JFK, and it was also a very good shield to Kennedy of any kind of threats to him on a ground level. Okay, the special agent in charge or the immediate assistant was on the trip. The motorcade route was usually well planned, not that horrible route in Dallas. Even present-day agents like Joe Petro, Dan Emmett, who I spoke to recently, the author of the book, When at Arm's Length, they go on and on how horrible that. Don't ever anybody let you tell you that, the Dallas ride, there wasn't that big a deal that people make. It was a big deal. It was an assassin's dream, that route. Rooftops were monitored. Buildings were checked. Overpasses were cleared. I got footage of JFK, various trips on the YouTube channel, and you'll see him coming to an overpass, and guess what? Nobody's there. But in Dallas, for whatever reason, there were men up there, win-losses in a lead car, shooing them off, and that distracted them, and that's when the firing began. Okay? Speed of the cars was crucial. And again, they blamed JFK for everything. They even said Greer that night in the morgue with the FBI men said, there were tons of President Kennedy. What if you slow down? It's more CYA after the fact. Kellerman was so nervous, he even told the FBI men, the security in Dallas was the most stringent and thorough ever for a president visiting a city. That's almost an exact quote. I mean, I don't think even the Warren Commission had paused or wouldn't swallow that, but these guys were shocked.
Again, I'll reference Colonel Prouty, where he's someone who actually was on a presidential security detail, and he said that the security detail in Dallas that morning was pathetic.
Exactly. Yeah, God bless him. Bless your Prouty. The bubble top, here's another thing, too. Not everything's black and white. Everybody thinks the bubble top is one piece. It was actually between 6 and 7 pieces. Just for the record, we'll just say 6. There was actually a little ancillary part of it. Sam Kinney, the driver of the FOB car, his duty, I spoke to him at least 3 times, real nice gentleman. They weren't all bad guys. A lot of these guys were actually good, and he's one of the few agents that actually believe there is a conspiracy. We'll get into that in a little bit. He told me that many times the bubble top was either on in nice weather, not just rainy weather. It was also on in a partial format, which you'll see on my blog and my videos, where just the front and rear piece was on, but the middle piece was left open so JFK and his occupants could get air and intermittently stand up and wave to the crowd. That's what that little roll bar in the middle of the metal roll bar. So again, not only that this big conundrum, people always say, hey, Vince, that's a shame the bubble top wasn't on. Well, not only what most people thought was bulletproof. It turned out it wasn't, okay? But most people didn't know that. They assumed it was bulletproof, so it was psychological deterrent right there. Number 2, would it have obscured an assassin or assassin's view via the sun glare? Okay, would anybody even attempted to fire, they would have saw the bubble top, forget it, scratch this, there's the bubble top. But with a partial bubble top, which he did often have, okay, you would have had that, the best of both worlds, an open car and some semblance of protection. An agent I spoke to, Bob Louie, told me the bubble when they went to Puerto Rico, the bubble top was on. He's in the back of the car with Kellerman. They're going 60 miles an hour. He's riding on the back of that little footstep. That's another myth. This whole thing, these cars are going too fast. They always try to throw these little things at, especially General Blaine in his whitewash book, The Kennedy Detail, which makes the Warren Report look like the Bible. It's so full of pablum. And don't get me wrong, even that book, it goes to show you can't throw everything out. There's actually some good things in that book, but it's loaded with. Vince Palamara wrote me this letter. It's very disturbing. I got to clear things up for my grandchildren. I don't want them to think that I'm the reason why Kennedy's killed. I mean, I don't want to get too, high, like everything revolves around me. But I'm just going to tell you straight up. His lawyer sent me a threatening letter before the book came out. Okay, so we're going to get a court order to stop you from saying these things, blah, 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 blah. This is ridiculous. You know what it was? The truth hurts. Because these gentlemen said what they said. They wrote what they wrote. And they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, not only that day in Dallas, but also because they're going online now as old men and seeing, oh, no, I cannot believe Art and Jerry told Vince Palamara these things. We got to straighten this up. I got kids. I got grandkids. I got a legacy. Dan, I got a pension. And they come out and Simon & Schuster, arguably the biggest book company in the world. And now, again, I don't get into tangents. I got much more to cover here. But next year's the 50th anniversary, boys and girls. That's going to be huge. The Kennedy detail is going to be a major Warner Brothers movie, so they're going to shove it down everybody's throat that JFK was his own worst enemy. Again, Oswald did it, and JFK helped too. They're hoping people leave that theater and say, boy, I tell you what, that JFK, he had it coming through a bandit. He turned around and told those agents to get the car. And I have to throw this in. I don't care. I'm jumping around. Sam Gibbons, who just passed away, congressman for many years in Florida, he wrote me a letter in 2004 and said he was riding right next to Kennedy in Tampa. He said JFK was in a great mood. He never ordered agents off the car. As I remember, the agents were on the car the whole time, the whole trip. You see pictures of them in Tampa. They're smiling. There's Don Lawton, Chuck Sabro in the back of the car. I spoke to another gentleman, Tony Zappone. He says they were on the back of the car the whole time until the end of the trip when they were returning to the airport, when the formal motorcade's basically over and they're going at a faster clip. That's when Gerald Blaine in his book tries to say 4 days before Dallas, that was the quirk of fate. You know, like Lincoln's guard steps away for a drink, so to speak. Well, hey, Kennedy ordered us off the car, and that's where this all happened. Again, I got to complete my list before I get to complete it. I'm talking about the bubble top. Well, you also had the sticky conundrum of the press and the photographers. Almost invariably, there was either a convertible or a flatbed truck of press and photographers in front of the limousine, okay? Tom Dillard, Dallas Morning News, is one of several reporters. We don't even need him to say it. We can see the photos ourselves. It was canceled at the last minute, and they were putting Chevrolet convertibles in the back of the motorcade, which let them literally and figuratively totally out of the picture. So we wouldn't need an Abraham Zapruder or Orville Nix. We would have had up-close professional. You remember James Elkins, the lone professional photographer in Dealey Plaza? We would have had a slew of AP, UPI, NBC, ABC, CBS cameramen filming the motorcade. But, just a coincidence, they're taken away too. And, let's see, the military aide, General Godfrey McHugh or Ted Clifton, usually rode in between the agent in charge and the driver. They were told for the first time not to ride in the car by the Secret Service. Guess why, boys and girls? To give JFK more political access. That's it's in the House Committee. There's Godfrey McHugh saying he was asked for the first time. See, that's another thing. It's incredible. It's not just that, this happened many times. No. Dr. Berkeley, the president's physician, almost always was on not only the trips with JFK, he rode close to the fog car, sometimes in the fog car. There was a couple times he was in the presidential limousine. He was outraged. He was fighting with an agent at Love Field. This is also in Evelyn Lincoln's testimony, JFK's secretary, that for the first time they could remember, he was told, no, we don't need you by the car. When actually in Florida, he did ride the fog car. It's just crazy. It goes on and on. The military aide, like I said, and JFK supposedly, 4 days before Dallas, he allegedly orders him off the car. But when I speak to these gentlemen years later, they're all telling me that's not true. So you know what it is? These guys got older. They forgot what stories. They're not before like worried about their pensions. They're not under oath anymore. They're just telling it like it is. Hey, some guy's calling me, Oswald acted alone. Yeah. Kennedy, no, he never orders to do anything. No, see what I mean? It's like you catch these guys telling the truth because they're not under oath. They're not like checking each other. Bob and Harry, what did you say? And that's what it gets down to. And the best thing I ever did was taking. I got Harrison Livingstone, who's the author of High Treason, High Treason 2, and some other books, who really put down the mantle. I helped him interview a few Bethesda autopsy witnesses like Gerald Custer, who ironically lives in Pittsburgh, and a couple other people, and I realized, boy, the power of primary sources and primary people. It's one thing to read somebody else's book. It's a whole other ball of wax because you speak to these guys, and that's why I was obsessed. I just went on a tear. It's before the Internet kicked in, too, so I'm going directory assistance, I'm going on hunches, I'm going on buddies of theirs telling me where they live. And, again, thank God I did this yeoman work because a lot of these guys have passed away since. See, if I would have waited 6 more months, Jerry Bain would have died. You know what people would be telling me today? Vince, I don't believe a word you're saying. You know why? You didn't speak to the number one agent. How do we know what he had to say? Well, thank God I did because he put a squelch on all this. Kennedy was a very nice man, never ordered him off the car, never interfered with their actions at all. This whole thing about the motorcycles, you got Floyd Boring and Win Lawson saying, to me, there's no truth that JFK reduced the motorcycles. The unfortunate thing, official history shows that Win Lawson was the agent who told Jesse Curry, the Dallas police chief, that JFK it interferes with his conversations. We got to reduce the motorcycles in the formation. This does it for Dallas, though. In San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth, there's the normal motorcycle surrounding Kennedy's limousine. It gets to a point where you've got to say to yourself, Oswald or no Oswald, conspiracy or no conspiracy. Are these coincidences, or you got to ask yourself, what else is it? And I got to throw out one more little caveat, little footnote to everything. Earlier, I talked about, I'm a man. I admitted I made a mistake with the misidentification of that agent, Henry Ribka, who actually was at, one thing I didn't say, that agent that I misidentified actually was at Love Field and actually did jog with the limousine. He's just not in the famous WFAA ABC video jog along limousine. But if you look at his Secret Service report, it's a YouTube video I explain. It's called Secret Service Stand Down Explained. Okay, Secret Service Stand Down Explained. I go into the misidentification, and I show that not only is it not a big deal, I show my rationale as the average person. I said, boy, I can see why you thought it was Ribka. It makes sense. He starts jogging the limousine. Don Lawton relieves him. Don Lawton is the agent we see in the famous video shrugging his shoulders and saying, what gives? Okay, so that's that. I also have to throw one more thing out there. I talked about, the three things about the candidate Kennedy and, the military bases.
You know what I'm going to do? We got a break. We got a break coming up in about 30 seconds. So what I'll do is I'll cut you off there. When we come back in final segment, I'll have you cover that final piece. And then we can go over, I want to go over the Secret Service agents, because I know there are some that are still, they still stick to the original story. And then there's the ones that put out a book. Conveniently now that Jackie's, a lot of Jackie Kennedy's information came out where she even thought that LBJ was involved, even though everything else the news covered about that, all those different things that Jackie thought except LBJ. And when they did cover the LBJ thing, they said, she thought he was a jerk, basically. It was a little more to it than that, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Final segment coming up. My guest, Vince Palamara. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And final segment here on tonight's Friday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am joined tonight by Mr. Vince Palamara. Vince, thank you so much for sitting in here for 2 hours.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And, I've been letting, normally I try to have more banter back and forth, but because I know a lot of the stuff, and I know the listeners have heard me pontificate on it, sometimes, actually not sometimes, most of the time, as I often do when I have guests on, I let them just go, especially if their heads are filled with a lot of information that, you giving it to me and then me giving it to the audience it's like, the telephone game. There's something that's going to get lost in translation where it's better that you, who yourself has done the research, some of the minutia that have, been burned into your brain while you've been researching this that you think is a valid, point to bring forward. So there's no reason for me to even interrupt you, just, let you go. And I mean, you're tearing it up. So thank you for bringing the house down, Vince. I know that there was a third point you wanted to make, and then I wanted to get into the Secret Service a little bit more, some of the agents. And the reason why, really quick, and then I'll give you the floor, is because as we were talking off air, it's interesting that Jackie's daughter released her personal stuff, whatever it was, her papers, whatever they called it, about a year ago. A little over a year ago, and when it came out, and it was ahead of time, but when it came out, there was a lot of stuff in there about how she felt about LBJ and how she felt he was connected to the assassination and other things, her memories of being there and everything else. Well, not too long afterwards, a bunch of agents come out with a book, right? This new book that comes out, and if I remember correctly, these guys are actually saying, there was no conspiracy. It is what the government says it is, very conveniently. And the media focuses more on this than they did what Jackie said in her writings. And even worse, when they did cover anything she said about LBJ, the only thing they said was she wasn't very fond of LBJ and thought he was a jerk or something, basically along that lines. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was like the message they were pushing across. I mean, there's a big difference between I think LBJ is a jerk and I think he was involved in my husband's assassination. There is a little bit of a gap there between the two.
Yes, to put it mildly. Well, keep in mind something, too. I said most of these agents believe there wasn't a conspiracy. Some notable exceptions. Sam Kinney, the driver of the Fallout car in Dallas, and many other trips, believed there was a conspiracy. He thought Oswald acted alone, but he was adamant there was a conspiracy. Gerald O'Rourke, a White House detail agent on the Texas trip, not in Dallas, but on the other stops, was a fervent believer in conspiracy. Came out in actually 2003 in an article in the Colorado newspaper, kind of made some play before it was squelched. That he came out and just laid it on the line that the government was involved, this, that, and the other. For years, we know Abraham Bolden, first African-American agent of the White House detail, believed it was a conspiracy. Then you got some nebulous things. Well, Maurice Martin, especially in charge of Chicago, also believed there was a conspiracy. Then you have several agents that didn't overtly say there was a conspiracy, but then gave details that many people think, this is the linchpin of conspiracy. You have people like Bill Greer and Roy Kellerman saying the back wound didn't exit. The back of the head was gone. Clint Hill was another one where the back of the head was gone. He's going on book tours. He says it so many times, I've lost count, where the right rear of JFK's head was gone. Hello, the autopsy photos don't show that. Forrest Sorrells intimated the shot came from the front. Paul Landis in 2 different reports, which he confirmed in 1979 was true and accurate. A shot came from the front. So there you have it. And what it boils down to, and I'm going to stress this for people, everybody has an ego. If they say otherwise, they're lying. And especially if you're any kind of author or whatnot, research, you have pride. And I want to say the following statement, and this is not delusions of grandeur, because it is what it is, whether you think nice guy, whatever, it is what it is. And I can tell you right now that my 22-page letter to Clint Hill woke a sleeping giant. Clint Hill had no desire, anything on his plate to write a book. He wasn't going to write a book. He even said he turned hundreds of offers to write a book down. The guy was in his mid-70s, happily retired, and I want to stress something, happily married for decades. Get to that in a second. And in the summer of 2005, I sent this letter, and all hell breaks loose. Turned out his best friend is Jerry Blaine. That's the summer that Jerry Blaine begins writing the Kennedy detail. And that's a New York Times bestseller on Simon & Schuster, and Mrs. Kennedy and Me, the follow-up book comes out. It is what it is. I mean, for better or for worse, I know I'm the culprit. And the crazy thing is, the actuarial thing is about people that get divorced after 50 years of marriage. Sad little footnote here. Clint Hill got divorced just a few years ago. He was married to his wife Gwen for 50 years, and it's shocking. I don't know, this confluence of events that she had up to here, but the thing is, he said in 1982 he's been clean and sober for 30 years, so it's not his drinking, which is another story himself. In 1990, he released The Demons of Dallas. Him and his wife went to Dallas. He said, I did the best I could do. So why would she leave him late in life when he's approaching 80 with their grandkids and everything? It's bizarre, and I think it's related to all this. I really do. Woke a sleepy giant. Gerald Blaine, I spoke to him in 2004 and early 2005. He didn't say he was writing a book, and you could just tell. He was vacationing, going around the world. There was nothing on his plate. But more important than that, he even admitted in press interviews that was the summer. And he said, just because when I was going on the Internet and people were accusing my brothers, this was hit below the belt. Well, this is crazy. This is in my CTKA review I referenced before. CTKA Palamara, and it'll come up for CTKA Kennedy detail, my detailed review of Blaine's book. Gerald Blaine on his blog admits that Clint Hill briefed the current director of the Secret Service, Mark Sullivan. He briefed him on the purpose of writing the Kennedy detail. Then every year, the Association of Former Agents of the United States Secret Service gets together and they talk, and it's totally private. It's only members only. No member of the press or public is allowed there. They don't record anything, nothing. Well, on his blog,
So let me ask you, Vince. By definition,
Sure.
would that be considered a secret society?
Yes, without a doubt. No press. Oh, they also go on to assume names too. A buddy of mine in Dallas back in 1991 happened to pawn the conference totally by accident. Bill Livengood, who's a former agent, really good friend of Clint Hill and Jerry Blaine. He's the guy we ever see on TV during the State of the Union, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. That old man, he introduced Clinton many times, Bush many times, Obama many times to his recent retirement. Well, Bill Livengood's a former agent, and he was there for the Association of Former Agents Conference. And all of a sudden, my friend was noticing, wait, this looks like an agent. It looks like Paul Landis. And the guy lied to him and said, oh, no, we're here for a business convention, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, no press is allowed, no citizens allowed. Even their wives, a lot of times, they don't even want their wives there. But on his blog, he admitted again, this is Blaine this time. We talked about Clint Hill in brief by the current director, why they wrote this book. Director Sullivan was invited to the conference, and again, they had a business meeting about the purpose for writing this book. So again, is this paranoia or it's not? I can tell you right now, it isn't. It's my 22-page letter, Woke the Sleeping Giant. Here they are briefing the director. Here they are going on C-SPAN, totally out of context, mentioning me, showing YouTube videos, parroting back and forth about me. Here's Clint Hill, his next appearance on C-SPAN out of nowhere. Hey, that fellow we talked about last time, Vince Palamara, he seems to like my new book. Pretty crazy, to put it mildly. And again, it's like a 1, 2, 3 punch. And all you get the 2 books. Well, there's a Discovery Channel documentary called The Kennedy Detail. Well, now, again, I mentioned earlier, next year is going to be huge. There's going to be a national moment of silence. All the major networks are going to be in Dealey Plaza. This is going to be bigger than any other anniversary. I'm going to tell you right now. Well, they're going to have the Kennedy Detail movie, again, Warner Brothers, not just some little documentary. It's going to be in theaters near you, and they're going to be doing this. They're going to be saying, not only just Oswald did it, they're going to try to shove this down your throat that, well, JFK ordered these men off the car, so they're innocent. They're innocent. There's nothing they could do. They did the best they could do.
And Douglas, James Douglas does a good job in his book, JFK and the Unspeakable, pointing out how one of the reasons that you see a lot of the stuff like the demonization of him, like with, he didn't, he told the Secret Service to stand down, or he was a womanizing scumbag, or this or that. They're trying to make him put him in a bad light because eventually they can't stop the truth of the fact from coming out. So what they're going to try to do is now they're going to do an assassination on his character. Not only did they literally assassinate him, but now his character and his memory has to be altered. So that way, a lot of people, because remember, people don't even realize this, but mind control, everything else, people's opinions are formulated for them. Without even realizing it, subconsciously, a lot of people will be like, well, Kennedy was kind of an a-hole. So, he was kind of a womanizing scumbag. He was arrogant. And look, he ordered the Secret Service to stand down. It's his own fault that he got shot the way he did by that lone nut Oswald. That's exactly what they're trying to get people to accept, that kind of garbage, which is exactly...
That's the perfect segue.
Right?
Papa, I've got to cut you. This is the perfect segue into it was almost like that was meant to be. Because I'll tell you something right now. You talk about the character assassination, the kind of feeling of, well, it's a shame he had to die, but boy, this guy, he wasn't exactly really white. Look at this, what he did. He was unbelievable, his morals. Well, I'm telling you something right now. There were 2 agents in Dallas, at least 2 agents in Dallas, that harbored malice toward JFK for his private life. They were Emory Roberts, the special agent in charge of the fall car, and Tim McIntyre. Those were... one was referenced because Emory Roberts died in 1973 by Tim McIntyre. Tim McIntyre was one of the 4 agents who spoke to Seymour Hersh, The Dark Side of Camelot, in that aforementioned ABC documentary I mentioned earlier, where they talked, their anger and disgust over Kennedy's private life. These were agents, and a couple of them were in Dallas, and they're sitting there saying, this angered me by the president. And then Tim McIntyre, in his book, he didn't mention him by name in the documentary, but in the book he said, my ship supervisor, Emory Roberts, came over to me. You're going to see a lot of crap with the president. Hey, don't even tell your wife. And Tim McIntyre said, he worried about it a lot. He talked about it a lot, being Emory Roberts, about JFK's private life. And lo and behold, here's Emory Roberts in charge of the Falk Car agents. Here's Emory Roberts ordering the men not to move during the shooting. Here's Emory Roberts ordering back Don Lawton and Love Field. Just a coincidence, huh? I mean, and I spoke to these guys later on, so I spoke to Larry Newman, Tony Sherman, Joe Palella, and Tim McIntyre, all of them for different reasons, not just about JFK's private life, but they all waxed on about their disgust. And these are men that were charged with protecting the president. I can tell you, getting a little more recent, an agent, I can't remember his name right now, I'm thinking of Brian Williams. I forget his first name, his last name was Williams, but he was an agent who guarded Clinton. And he said that he quit because he was disgusted with Clinton's private life. Keep that in your memory bank when you think about these guys. That some of these guys, all it takes is a dirty agent here and there. And here were these guys who were coming out. And by the way, the timing was the height of the Lewinsky scandals when the Seymour Hersh book came out. Bad timing. The then director, Lou Moretti, issued an order to former agents to keep your mouth shut. But the damage was done. Tim McIntyre is riding on the Falk Car. Emory Roberts is the commander of the Falk Car agents. They're saying these things. It's unbelievable. Oh, one thing I got to get to. I was talking about Jerry Bain, the special agent charge before. He also laid another doozy on me I haven't even mentioned yet about the route. For years, some people think it's myth, some people think it's fact that the motorcade route was changed. And there's been a good counter-argument. In my book, I go into it about that there's no question there was alternate routes. I mean, it's a historical fact, and I have Dallas police officers tell me about alternate routes. Sam Bella, who was a sergeant in the motorcycle case, said the route was changed the night before, which is very important, okay? And then we can go into the details about how terrible the route was. Jerry Bain, the special agent in charge, told me over the phone, he was asked by the House Select Committee in executive session about the route. He says, well, I know the route was changed, but I don't remember the reason why. And I just completely, oh my God, he's admitting the route was changed. And I go to his House Select Committee testimony, the testimony that was released, not the executive session testimony, and they're going on about Dallas in comparison to the Florida trip, because there's no question that there was a change made in Florida. They rode by helicopter, ironically, in Miami. And he made great pains to differentiate between the Florida trip and the Texas trip, okay? And he was definitely referring to the Texas trip when he said the route was changed. Well, I know the route was changed, but I don't remember the reasons why. And again, it's a stranger on the phone. He's telling me he was satisfied Oswald acted alone. He even said that in his JFK Library oral history. That's the dichotomy here. With a few notable exceptions, a lot of these guys think it's hogwash. Oh, get a life, Oswald acted alone. But then they say things like the back of the head's gone, the bullet in the back didn't exit, JFK never ordered us to do anything. And then if you get back to, well, wait a minute now, that's going against official history. And then you go up to modern speed. You talk about 1963. Let's talk about 2012 going to 2013. You got these best-selling books and documentaries and movies, and they're trying to just throw the final slab of propaganda, trying to squelch it all. The 50th anniversary is going to be huge, and this is their mission. Just like right now, you got the Peter Jennings show. They replaced Phil Kennedy as the Oswald Did It, Life segment. Well, this movie and perhaps other programs, too, we're going to try to do it, too. Even though the public opinion polls are overwhelmingly in their favor, they're going to try their darndest to influence this generation, not the generation 20 years ago of JFK, Oliver Stone movie. They're going to try to say, look, hey, not only did Oswald do it, but JFK was a womanizer, and he kind of helped the situation because he ordered the men off the car, and he didn't want the motorcycles and the bubble top, and a lot of crap. It's a lot of exaggeration and stupidity.
You want to know, and this is just an idea that popped in my head. This is what I would do if I was like Ventura, right, and I had any sort of money, or and I wanted to get the truth out. I would talk to Oliver Stone, because it's been said that the reason why Oliver Stone won't talk about 9/11 or other such things anymore is because he's got 2 strikes against him, and third strike, and you're in jail for life over there in California, and he doesn't. Yeah. And they've word is he's been threatened with that. So Ventura should go to Oliver Stone, buy the rights or rent the rights or whatever to JFK, the director's cut from him, just for a long enough period of time for him to run it. And he can make a deal with Stone that, he can get proceeds from whatever the movie, ticket sales, whatever. But and I say Jesse because he likes the JFK assassination. Plus he's got he might at least have some of the money or connections to help get this going, and then put it in the theaters for a month, for the whole month of November, maybe even like a month and a half going into December to counter that.
Yes.
I mean, that would be something that we should start getting to, people should start looking into. Somebody should contact Oliver Stone, and it's something we should start now, because this needs to be countered. And if people think what I organized here at Orion this year with the 12 hours of JFK special was huge, you ain't seen nothing yet. Next year, I know Joe Joseph's going to be on board. Timmy Watts will be on board. I'm sure Ryan and other hosts here that are conspiracy-minded. When it comes to the 50th anniversary, I'm sure they'll be on board to at least do one broadcast, something special, and we're going to make, if people think what we did this year was good, just wait until next year for the 50th anniversary.
Sounds great.
It needs to be countered. I mean, this is complete garbage what they're doing. I mean, it's all lies, right? A lot of it's disinfo, like you said.
Well, you know what, Popeye, I tell you what, there's a Marillion song I love in the lyrics. The one is so true. Part of the lyrics are, thank God for the Internet. And it's true. Thank God for the Internet when it comes to getting this information out many times for free to people. The click of a mouse or a keyboard, there it is, because that's been our greatest asset right now. Because, the way the world is now, you got to make the effort to go buy a book or a Kindle. You got to wait for a documentary that might never show up on a TV screen nowadays with them censoring everything. But the Internet's there. we got the people on our side with the opinion polls, and the internet is booming with information. So that's the one good thing. That's like one thing people were saying. It's one thing for Gerald Blaine and Clint Hill to write these best-selling books. But books come and go. The internet's free, baby. It's there forever, and all the information. I find it so many times. I've had a lot of emails with people that like their books and even believe it to a point, and they say, you know what, I came to your site, and now I'm starting to wonder about what I just read. And I'm like, yes, there you go. And I go through the big spiel. In fact, not only do I review Gerald Blaine's book, I review the documentary and Clint Hill's book. I got to get something in real quick. I know we only have a few minutes left, but just very quick. Like, probably people out there that know is probably thinking, Vince, why didn't you say this earlier? We've also, not only did the House Select Committee came out and said that Dallas was uniquely insecure. They were referring to the motorcycle formation, but they used the word uniquely insecure. We also have the drinking incident the night before into the morning. 9 agents, including, there he is again, Clint Hill, were drinking. Okay, drinking on duty is grounds for removal from the service. This is a Secret Service manual that was made available in the Warren Commission volume.
And wasn't the club they were drinking at owned by Jack Ruby?
Yeah, that was it. They went to Fort Worth Press Club, then they went to the cellar, and sometimes people confuse the two. They did their hard drinking at the Fort Worth Press Club, and there's witnesses to that. Jack Mosley and a couple of the pressmen saw them drinking. Okay, then they went to the cellar, and they may, I'm going to underline, or may have just had fruit drinks and things there. And they did their drinking at the Fort Worth Press Club. Now, they admitted in reports that, I just had a beer or two or a scotch and water. Well, these guys were getting investigated. They could lose their jobs, their pensions, their reputation, God knows what else. Do you think to the chief of the Secret Service, I'm surprised they even admitted what they did admit to, but it's grounds for removal of the service and no punishment. A president's murdered, his head shot off. It's like some of these guys were promoted. Clint Hill became specially in charge of the White House details a few years later. Floyd Bourne became an inspector, a highly coveted position of power. Okay, so you had the drinking incident the night before. That's why I say some of these guys had sunglasses on.
Well, compare that really quick. Compare that to what happened with this quote-unquote Secret Service scandal with the prostitutes.
Exactly.
Like a year ago. These guys were, prosecuted. They lost, and when I say prosecuted, I don't mean legally, but I mean, by their executively, loss of jobs. Some of the military are getting in trouble, maybe non-judicial punishment, maybe even court-martials. I mean, when you follow it up, you find out a lot of these people are getting in trouble. Now, compare that to a president actually getting assassinated, not guys getting laid in their off hours and, with hookers, but actually getting drunk the night before, and then and not saying that the result is because they got drunk he was killed, but it did slow down a lot of people's response times. And
well, keep in mind something too. Also, sleep deprivation it plays havoc on reflexes. Some of these guys only got between 1 to 3 hours sleep. Do the math. If you're going to bed at 5 a.m. and you have to report for duty at 8 a.m., we'll be nice and say you got 3 hours sleep. Did you even get 3 hours sleep? You know how horrid that is for your reflexes? Then you had a drink or two, or God knows how much you really had. Even one sip of alcohol was grounds for removal from the service. And not only do we have Abraham Bolden saying there was a precedent for this, the recent events in Cartagena, we realized that there was decades-long precedents for this. This was not an isolated event, and a president gets killed. Then we also got the famous people running into quote-unquote Secret Service agents on the Knoll. Officially speaking, no agents were there. They were all in the cars of the moving motorcade or waiting for JFK at the trademark. But the thing is, and I always throw it as a monkey wrench in my book, hopefully coming out next year, that it could have been an official agent. He just wasn't there officially, if you know what I'm saying. People have always thought, it's a fake agent. It could be one of them CIA guys, couldn't it? No,
FBI does that stuff all the time when they send their agents to go do nefarious, dirty deeds behind the scenes. Vince, we're out of time.
Okay.
Just an incredible interview. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, Vince is just a wealth of knowledge. His book should be coming out next year, hopefully, with Trying Day, so stay tuned for that. And Vince will be back on, actually, sooner rather than later. I'm going to have him back on in a few weeks, and we're going to be going into a few more things about the Kennedy assassination. I'm going to be, bringing more stuff to light, so stay tuned for that. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, Mae Brussel airs from 12 to 1 after me, so stay tuned for her, and I'll see you again on Sunday. We are out of here.